Here we are continuing the build for our drag car based on a Traxxas platform. For those of you that have been following, we have actually completed the body. Now we're going to start mounting our electronics. So we have a few things to do. We have to mount our receiver box, receiver, plug-in, our servo, and finish mounting our ESC and motor. Now, you can use your stock motor, which is something I would recommend, especially if you bought the VXL, which this is based off Traxxas VXL models. Those brushless systems are very good systems. Even if you want to use the brushed system, say you bought a non-VXL and you have the Titan 12-turn motor with the XL5 ESC, those are very good electronics, very good options. But in this case, this is going to be used for a different class, so we're going to be using different electronics. Here we have a Hobbywing XR8 SCT, so it's for short course really, but you can use it for anything that's, you know, a short course 10 scale or 8 scale buggy. The motor is actually an LRP motor. It's a motor that is no longer available here. I've tried contacting some hobby shops in Australia, but Aussies won't get back to me with them. But anyway, it's the Dynamic 10L LRP motor. It's a 3700 kV motor. I like it because it's a long can. I just want torque since it's going to be a drag car. That's the reason why. But to start a mount, the first thing, depending if your ESC came with this plate or not, or your chassis, or whatever car, sometimes they do on the slashes, for example, you can use this plate. This is where the ESC generally bolts on, or screws on, and you can screw this on at different places. What I like about this plate is I'll still have a little gap here, so if I need to add ballast, which I'm planning on, I can still add ballast here. Which type of ballast I'd be using are just the little wheel weights, right? 7 grams. You can buy them at different places. We'll get to that at some point. Now I want to mount this as far back as possible. To be honest, most of the weight that I want to add right here, right in front of the wheels to counter this weight, but also to keep most of the weight here on the rear tires. So first thing I need to do is just mount this up here. So I'm just going to use the countersink screws. You can use 6mm screws, 8mm. Just don't get anything that's too long. 6mm is good. If you get screws that are too long, you're going to go through the chassis down the bottom. So let's go ahead and get these installed. All right, you're going to need your 2mm drive for this. And we have this plate mounted. The other reason why I want it further back is because these wires are shorter, so I'm going to be mounting this here. They only extend so far. To be honest, I prefer having the wires as short as possible. I could get longer wires, but I don't like using long wires. These are way too long for my liking, but it'll work out. Then I can shift the battery up or down, depending on where I want the weight. The next thing, we need to mount the receiver box. We're just going to use the stock box, which is this one here. It already has some tape. That tape is good. The receiver box goes this direction, so it's just going to mount right in here, and you're just going to use the screws that came with it. So the assumption is that you got these parts from a donor vehicle. And we're just going to go ahead and put those 2 screws. One little recommendation though, before you put the screws in there, send all your wires through. And the reason why is your ESC wire has to go across through here. So it makes it a lot easier to feed through. If you mounted the box, it'll probably be faster, to be honest, to unmount the box and send the wire through. Once this wire's through like this, now you can start doing all of that. The other thing too is if you are going to be using this antenna tube, this little portion here for the antenna, go ahead and just put the receiver inside and run the antenna. You're going to have to run the antenna through the outside, and that's it. So just go ahead and mount this in here. As you can see, I am using a Futaba radio. just like it. There's nothing wrong with the Traxxas radio. The only thing is I do have more than one vehicle, and I don't like having a ton of receivers transmitters just lying about. That's the reason why. So I can have up to 10 vehicles on my Futaba. I'll make a video about that at some other point. It's just a basic Futaba, but they work great. There's some other receivers too. You can always look at Spectrum. Spectrum makes some good radios, so do that. So now I'm just going to put the 2 screws in there. Now, if you rush things, you're bound to make a mistake, such as me putting this receiver on there. So to be honest, all you have to do is just pry it out. It'll be fine. I'm going nice and slow just for the camera, but run these wires through first. So make sure you put your servo and your ESC connectors through. So this white, red, and black, this is my receiver. I'm going to have to feed some more wire through. And this one here belongs to my servo. It's an orange, red, and brown. The main thing when you're connecting these is remember that your servo goes to channel 1, and these little metal, where you can see the metal tabs, this goes toward the top of the receiver. This is the top, this is the bottom. So imagine it's like this, right? These go toward the top. This is the orientation. Do not flip it around. That's something to keep in mind. They're going to go like this every time. So this is going to go in 1. There it is. And this is going to go in 2. If you accidentally plug them in wrong, what's going to happen is you're going to turn the wheel on your receiver and throttle is going to engage. It's either going to want to go forward or reverse, and the vehicle is not going to run. And then when you hit the brake, it's going to turn, or the throttle, it'll actually turn one way, but the steering will be off. It will not work. Some of you may want to try it just for fun. I don't recommend it. But if you flip those, your throttle is not going to control your steering at all. So if that's the problem that you have, double check your connections. And then once you double check your connections, everything should be good. So remember, steering 1, ESC number 2. So now I'm just going to fix these wires because there's this little other cap that goes in here. Something else, if you do want this to be sealed, make sure that you put this weather stripping in here. The other thing you can do too is put some petroleum jelly. Vaseline, for example, is a type of petroleum jelly that you could use. And also put some here on the cover, here on the wires, just to seal it. So we're going to go ahead and cover up our electronic box, our receiver box. Now, you do not actually need an antenna tube. You can put an antenna tube here. I've got plenty of tubing. I just don't feel like putting one on. I may put one later. The reason why you don't really need one is because this is going to be covered by the body. The reason why we used to use antenna tubes on everything is because back in the day when I was a kid, we didn't use this 2.4 system that we use now. We used to have the antennas where you had to pull them out in sections, and then the antennas on the receivers were massive, so that you would generally make a hole through the body. They would stick out of the body. So you would use the antenna tube to protect the antenna wire in case the car flipped and slid on the antenna. That way you didn't ruin your antenna. And antenna length back then was very important. Nowadays, to be honest, I mean, don't try this, but you could probably cut this. Don't do it on purpose. I've done it accidentally. It was during a crash, you know, that thing got cut off. But anyway, it was a mess. But the receiver still worked. So these don't even have to be that long anymore, but they still make them pretty long. Why? I have no idea. But anyway, this is all mounted up. So now what you need to do is you need to use double stick tape to stick your ESC onto this plate. If you were using the Traxxas factory ESC, it would actually just screw on here because it has the 2 little holes where you can put the screws through and screw it on, but not in this case. So because we're using double stick tape on this, We have to make sure that our surfaces are clean. Now these are clean, but I'm still, it doesn't hurt to use a little more alcohol. And again, you can use any rubbing alcohol that you want. This is the particular one I'm using by Equate. And I'm just going to clean this up. And remember, circular motions, and you want to do the bottom of the ESC as well. One quick little note, notice this one does not have a sticker down here. That is good. The tape adheres better to the plastic. If you have some ESCs, for example, something by Traxxas, Castle Creation, they do make good systems. The only thing is they do have a sticker, so the sticker goes all the way around. You're going to want to cut that bottom part of the sticker off and peel it off so that the tape sticks well. Now I have this 3M double stick tape, and I'm just going to cut a piece off. Generally what I do is I score the top and I come down, but I try not to cut too deep so that I don't cut the bottom. And then once I get to the edge here, I just kind of bend the knife a little and then just finish scoring. And I grab the piece and then I just peel off. So if it's not completely cut, it's actually better for me. There we go. The reason why I don't want to score this, notice how this is still pretty neat, because then you'll damage the rest of the tape. You don't really want that. I'm going to place it on the actual plate, and the reason why is this is where most of the surface is. If I put it on the receiver, sorry, on the ESC, I meant ESC, let's just say I'd set it over here somewhere, right? There wouldn't be much surface area, but if I put it here, notice all the tape is going to be under the ESC. That's the reason why I put the tape on the little plate. Right now I'm just trying to make it adhere. Again, remember my rear wheels are not tight yet. I don't want them tight at the time, mainly because I'm going to be removing them later on, and I'm going to be using aluminum hexes that I need to go to my local shop and pick up. I don't want to run plastic ones. So you strip that, and then ESC, just make sure it's comfortable. You want these wires to have some slack. And there we go. And once you're there, just press on. If it's cold, this tape will not adhere very well. So make sure it isn't cold. So if you're doing this outside, make sure it's warm. If you're indoors, make sure it's not freezing inside. It's always better to do this when it's warm. If you use a heat gun, you can, but this tape adheres best when it's warm. All right, other than that, the only thing we have left is mounting our switch. This we're just gonna tuck in here. But our switch, we're just going to use double stick tape, and we're just going to tape it to the chassis. The reason why is I can reach underneath the body and then just click the button. That's the only reason why. Now, one quick little note, I'm using 5mm bullet connectors. That is my recommendation. That's what I use on everything. Sure, you don't need them for all applications. Sometimes you can get away with 4mm with a lot of things, but on something like this, even if you do run it into us, just go with 5mm bullets, especially because you're probably going to end up using, eventually, a better battery. So, that being said, let's just get the switch mounted. We're just going to have to cut a little square, again, alcohol, and you'll see where this ends up. And so over here underneath, I want to click right about there. Okay, good. Here we go. The only reason why I picked this spot is because if I reach under, I can just stick my finger and I'll hit the switch without having to look for it or remove the body. That way I don't have to look at it. Now, this is almost finished, and then we can move on to the motor. We just need one thing, this wire here. Do not leave this wire exposed the way it is now. If you seat your battery here, you will get dust, dirt, maybe even sand, and it'll get underneath your battery and it'll start rubbing between the battery and the wire, and you're just going to tear up the insulation and then fray the wires, possibly have a short in your ESC, or I mean, even if you just tear a wire, the ESC doesn't have a short, it's going to stop working. Then you have to take it apart, fix it, solder it. So for that, you can use a variety of tapes. You can use Scotch tape, just put some 3 little pieces, one in the middle and then one on each side to reinforce it. You could use masking tape if you want, but I recommend you just use some duct tape. This black stuff is the Gorilla duct tape. It's very tough. This is the same thing I use on Lexan bodies to reinforce them, or even if I crack them completely on the bodies that I use for short course for bashing, I've used this tape to just fix the crack. I mean, I've had bodies where the whole front end is just attached by maybe 2 centimeters of material, maybe up to an inch. Wait, centimeters, inches, what? Anyway, and this thing held up really, really well. I will have a video about that. But anyway, just get a piece of this little duct tape. I mean, it's the perfect size. It fits right in here. It'll cover up the wire. It's nice, durable, thick, and it'll protect that wire from getting destroyed by particles that get between it and the battery. You just apply a little piece of tape and that's it. If you wanted, you could add tape all the way through. I don't see the need. That's up to you. The important thing is to just cover that section there. And that's it. So again, this is the tape I use. There's other brands out there. You don't have to use Gorilla. Again, not sponsored by them. It's just a product that I've purchased and I've enjoyed. This one here, I think I picked this roll up at Lowe's. Probably $8, $9, don't remember. I'm sure the Home Depot has it as well. But anyway, that being said, we are set there. So now we can just move on to the motor. Now, for the motor, this one here happens to be a 5mm shaft motor, as you can see. So I'm actually going to use a gear that is also 5mm in diameter. Now to make it easier, I'm going to go ahead and remove this wheel. Actually, it was super loose. I could have used my hand. But this is one of the reasons why I did not tighten this. And remember, it's just a 7mm nut driver for that. It's going to come off. And all right, now you're going to be using your 2mm driver to use these. You can also use, whenever you buy a servo, you generally get some of these. They're usually the same size. But anyway, use a little bit of blue thread lock substance. There is you can buy Loctite or you can buy other brands. This is just a tube that came included in one of my Techno kits. So sometimes certain kits will already come with some form of thread lock. So keep that in mind. Now, the first one is going to be the top screw. So you want to line up the hole. There's going to be this one and that one. I want the top one first. So once it's lined up, I'm just going to set this in here, and then I'm going to start screwing. But notice I have a problem. I completely forgot that I have the large spur, so I'm actually going to have to remove that spur. So let's go ahead and remove that spur, which is great. I forgot to swap it out. So let me swap it out for the smaller one. This is the one that's going to go in there. It's a 76 tooth, which is the one that comes in the Bandit. The one on it right now is a 90 tooth, which is generally what comes in the brushed slash. All right, for this you're going to need your 2.5mm driver to remove all 3 screws. All right, so I loosened all 3 first. of the reasons why I'm picking the 76 over the 90 is because the motor is a 70 millimeter motor. So it's very long magnets in it. So it has quite a bit of power. So this, just line up those holes with these here on your slipper clutch. And then once you line them up, it's easier to line them up first because there is a bit of pressure here. There we go. You'll kind of feel it snap in place. Now, there's already some thread lock in these, so I'm not going to use thread lock. There's some residue in there that's good enough to make them tight. If yours do not, or if you're using brand new screws, make sure you put some thread lock on the tips of the screws. And really, you just need to put a tip here. As soon as you start screwing it, that will push the rest of the thread lock all the way up. You don't have to use a lot. A small amount goes a long way. The other thing too is make sure you use the blue one. Do not use the red thread lock. The red one is going to be a pain to remove, and from time to time you're going to want to remove these, either to just try a different spur or to replace your slipper clutch, because you're probably going to end up burning it up eventually. Alright, so now I can start tightening. And again, you want them snug, don't over tighten, because you will ruin your spur. Right, great. So that being said, this will fit now. Now, I know this is smaller, so it'll fit, but if I were using the larger one, I would have actually screwed on the motor first, and then I would have placed this one inside. But you know, if you've worked with these spurs before, you're familiar with the diameter, so you know what you can do and what you cannot do. But if this is the first time, so keep that in mind, or if you're going with a larger one, say you wanted to keep the 90, just keep it off, put the motor on, or put that screw. As soon as this one's in there, then you can go ahead and install the spur. Now I'm going to apply the second one, install the second screw, and there it is. And that's really it. Now I'm not going to tighten it all the way, and I am using a 2mm driver. I want this to be free so I can move it and adjust it. So notice how that moves. The reason why is I need to set my mesh. Now this here, so if you look at the gear, Traxxas, the teeth are closer to the transmission, so I'm going to be installing this side toward the transmission. It'll go like this, and then this little groove here, that's where the oppressor goes. The oppressor is this little set screw. Go ahead and see to that. Oh, actually, oh my god, I had the two screws here, so this is actually a 1/8, this is a 5mm. Notice the difference. I actually want to do the 5mm. Alright. Doesn't change everything else I said though. Alright. Now, one of the things that you want to do is you want to make sure you line up the two gears. So these two gears should line up. And if you press the motor in like this, not fully tight, you can do that to line up the gears. That way, you know the surfaces are going to be, there we go, touching properly. Alright, there we go, and this is a 2mm, I believe. Yes. If I were using the other one, now the only reason why I grabbed it this way is I don't want to torque on the shaft, because as I'm turning this, I am applying a torque to the shaft, so I'm just holding it this way, so I'm holding the entire motor. As I was tightening that. Do not over tighten. Make sure you use quality gears. I've actually seen people tighten these and then just break them, break the gears. It's not fun. Then you have to go through the whole thing. But anyway, here we go. Now we're going to set the mesh. To set the mesh, the only thing you need, I mean, I can eyeball it and do it that way, but you can use just a piece of paper. So if you cut up just a piece of binder paper or notebook paper, this is out of my notebook, just place it between the gears, just between the teeth, and roll it a bit. Notice how I'm rolling my thumb out, I'm not rolling it in. I don't want my thumb to get caught between the teeth of the gears. Then just move the motor toward it, and then you can start to tighten. So grab your 2mm driver, and then just start tightening up the motor. And that is it. So let's see, that's tightened. I think I'm gonna have to check to make sure it's set. All right, so there. This is the screw that controls your mesh. So then you tighten this one. And I want to make a little accordion. There we go. All right, and one of the things that you want is you want that little bit of play. If you don't have a little bit of play in there, you're gonna have to just give it a little more. Just release this a little more. You can also fold the paper in half if you feel that the paper is too thin, because not all pieces of papers are the same thickness. Some are thinner than others. So on this one here, I think I want it a little bit looser. So I'm going to go ahead and loosen up. I'm actually going to fold this paper in half. See, if I had just eyeballed it, I would have gotten it wrong the first time. But no, right? It's all demo, so it's all good, as they say. All right, there we go. All right, perfect. So now I'm going to tighten the back one first, or the bottom, right? The bottom's the one that sets your motor. And now I'm just going to tighten this one up. And that's it. Again, snug, don't over tighten, especially because this is plastic. You also don't want to risk stripping the holes in the motor. Okay, there we go. That feels better. Perfect. So that's it. So that's ready to go. Now I can just go ahead and install my cover. And like I said, you always want to run the cover. It just keeps a lot of little pebbles, little stones out of the gears. If you get just a little grain of sand here stuck between one of these teeth, it's going to just destroy your spur, and you're going to start noticing a little line. This little channel is going to start forming. And that's no fun, because then you're probably going to end up replacing one of these. They're not that expensive, but I mean, why replace something you didn't have to if you had just taken a few precautions? Now this cover's pretty easy. I actually really like these Traxxas covers, especially because you can adjust. You can remove this here, and you can adjust the slipper clutch without removing the cover, which is great. This is just a little rubber plug. It just goes in here. Now, if you are installing telemetry, there's also this little cover here that you're going to have to open up, because a wire has to go in through there. Usually a little temperature sensor, or the tachometer for your RPMs. So keep that in mind. This one will not have telemetry. There we go. Now I just need a screw there, screws are here, and again, 2mm driver. And I cannot emphasize enough the fact that you need quality tools. So use quality tools. Don't go and buy cheap tools at, I don't know, whatever stores. I could mention a few. I don't really want to. Let's say, okay, fine, Walmart, right? You go there and you buy a $2 set with 5 of these tools. They're not going to be very good. You know, save up, spend a little extra money. If you're just if you're a young kid, don't really have a job, just save your allowance. It's better that you spend your money once than having to buy things twice. There we go. And again, not sponsored, but MIP makes some great tools. This driver here has been with me for I don't know how many builds, and it's still, I mean, it looks great, it works great, versus even if you buy the Black Steel Craftsman, for example, or Husky, why are you bothering with Husky? Anyway, you will start, the tools will start wearing out. So even the team associated tools, the ones it's a multi-tool, it's stored in the handle, you take them on, you just put whichever tip you need. Those aren't very good. They'll start wearing out after a while. But these MIPs, man, I've turned so many screws with these. They are wonderful. So again, invest in quality tools. It's worth it. When I started in the hobby, I thought, you know, 60, 70 bucks for a set of tools was expensive. So I bought some less expensive tools for, I think the team associated, I think those cost about 40, 45. It's surprising the difference that $20, $30 will make when you buy tools. You get what you pay for with tools, so keep that in mind. Other than that, we have our electronics now installed, so really the only thing we would need is just a battery to test everything out, but we're not going to test it yet. We're going to test it at a later time. But this is it. Next video we're going to be working on some other items, and then at some point I will have the aluminum hexes, everything mounted, so then I can tighten up the wheels. But for now, thank you so much for watching this part here. Stay tuned, like, dislike, comment, especially if you do have experience and you're not new to the hobby, but you're still watching this video. Thank you so much, but share some of your experience and knowledge. Thank you. Until next time, be good.